Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March 8th, 2023 meeting of the Regional Housing Council. I'm Carolyn Cox, representing City of Lacey, and have with me today Ryan Andrews, our planning manager. And now let's go to Tumwater.
Hi, Michael Althauser, Tumwater City Council. My colleague Councilmember Kathy won't be joining us today. She had a conflict, but I'm joined by Brad Medroot from our planning department, as well as Erica Smith Erickson, also from our planning department, who joined us in the past couple of weeks.
Great. Well, welcome. Why don't we go to Thurston County next?
Hi, Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner, and with us today is Tom Webster, Keely Marino, Ramiro Chavez, our County Manager, and let me see, that is it.
Okay, thank you. And Olympia?
Hey everybody, Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council, and with me is Darian Lightfoot, our Director of Housing and Homeless Response, and Jacinda Stelgis. Your title is Affordable Housing Program Manager. I'm going to get it without having to look it up next time.
Awesome. So have we missed anybody? I'm not seeing Yelm here, so we're good to go. All righty. Has everybody had a chance to review the meeting agenda? Anybody want any changes?
I move to approve the agenda as published.
Perfect. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Danny, seconded by Carolina to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So the long-awaited advisory board charter, as revised after our last meeting discussion, is up for review and action. So Tom, are you going to be leading that one?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay.
So in your packet, based on the direction from the RHC last meeting, the technical team went back and has made some revisions to the advisory board charter. So in your packet is both a clean version as well as a track changes version. So I will share my screen and walk through at a high level the track changes versions that the tech team has come up with. Some of it is just some wordsmithing and cleaning up some language. So especially on this first paragraph, just trying to make it clear that so really just no intent changes intent, but just cleaning up some language. On the advisory boards in general, we did clarify to make sure that it was in line with the interlocal agreement that these advisory boards were staffed by subject matter experts or populated by subject matter experts rather than just a broad base of community members. So that was something that we caught and wanted to correct. Most of these others are just wordsmithing and clarification. In terms of for the term, we did clarify that because some members, we wanted to stagger the first term, so not everyone's term expired at the same date. Half the members will have an initial term of 2 years and the other half will have 3 years. So for those members who had an initial 2-year term, the max of their term will be 5 years and not 6 years. So just adding that clarification around the terms. They can reapply after they've been off the board for 3 years. The roles and responsibilities was just an edit for clarity. And then getting into the meat of what we were asked to do, and we heard 2 primary requests that the RHC wanted us to address. One was looking at the issue of shall versus should in terms of jurisdictional participation, and encouraging jurisdictions to recruit members from their jurisdictions to participate on these boards. So went through and did a close look at kind of the shoulds and shalls in the document and making sure that they were consistent and in line with the intent that the RHC has. So I'm clarifying that board members shall have from the representation from the following groups. So the language is jurisdictions of Lacey, Tumwater, Yelm, and so this is for the Affordable Housing Board. Shall each be represented by at least one member who is a resident or represents an organization with a housing focus that operates substantially in their jurisdiction. If a qualified member from a jurisdiction is not identified, a position on the board will be held open until a qualified member from that jurisdiction is approved to serve on the board. So indicating that if there's not someone from a jurisdiction that's qualified, we will hold that position open. And then each jurisdiction should proactively work to recruit potential members to serve on the advisory board. Then we went through it to clarify that 2 members shall be members of the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team or subsequent organization. And then 2 members shall represent the Lived Experience Steering Committee, be a current resident of subsidized housing, be eligible to participate in federally subsidized housing, have lived experience with homelessness, or belong to a population overrepresented in the homeless response system. Within this, going back a little bit to the subject matter experts, we also, so this is a broad list. So we didn't change this list other than clarifying, instead of listing realtors, which is a specific term, real estate brokers is broader, but subject matter experts, we wanted to define broadly. And so this list really defines an example of the types of people who would qualify as subject matter experts. It's not intended to be an exclusive list, but it was an example of the folks that could be subject matter experts. For the Homeless Services Advisory Boards, really the same type of edits. We do not have the requirement for City of Olympia participation, at least 1/3 of the members that apply to the Affordable Housing Board. So that doesn't apply to the Homeless Services Board. But otherwise the language edits are largely in line. We did add as part of the list of groups that faith community members providing homeless services, shelter, outreach, and hygiene, knowing that several communities really rely on their faith community partners to provide these services. So wanted to call them out specifically as part of the body of potential subject matter experts who would serve on these boards. With that, so I think the tech team had some good, robust conversations around these changes, but I think we ended a place where everyone is comfortable with where we landed and tried to meet the intent of the RHC and what we were tasked to do. So happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Tom, this is Carolyn. I think on this, it's on the second page. Let's see, shall be, maybe it's the third page. Whoa, there you go. All right. Under board membership shall include the third bullet. It says 2 members shall be active members. What is meant by active members?
Of the Housing Action Team, of the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team. So broadly, they should be, we don't define active, but people who, regularly participate in Housing Action Team meetings.
Okay, it's just a little confusing. I wonder if we might edit it just to say 2 members shall represent the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team. Is that okay with everybody?
I guess my one piece of feedback on that, Carolyn, would be that under that language, you wouldn't actually have to be on the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team to represent them.
Oh,
right? Like, what if you had 2 current members of, what about current or something? Because I think we want people who are on the team, right?
yeah. Okay, I think I was misreading that, which.
No, I agree with you though that active it's subjective. Like who is being active and who isn't is subject to interpretation. But 2 members shall be current members and I don't know how to wordsmith it, but it's so long as it's clear that these two members are literally members of the hat, I think that's fine.
It could say be current members of and represent the Thurston That Thrives, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Well, thanks for bearing with me on this. It was confusing and it just wasn't quite sure what we were trying to say there.
Sorry, my edit function, this is a PDF, so it's not so easy to edit on the fly.
Oh, okay.
But we like to change current participants. Does the double use of members become confusing if we say current participants?
Sure.
Ramiro has his hand up,
Is that-
Chair. Not sure if you saw him.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. So go ahead, Ramiro.
Thank you. I'm just curious as to why we have gone to changing the should with the shall. And the shall seems to be very imposing. And this is a charter. This is not state law or a code. So I'm struggling to see why do we need to use the word shall, because that seems to be extremely prescriptive. And if we say shall, what if we don't achieve those memberships? Is there going to be a penalty? I'm just elaborating because the connotation of the word shall, in my opinion, brings that perspective. And I wonder if there's a different word. So I don't understand the reasoning behind changing to that such a strong word of shall. So maybe a different word may be appropriate.
Okay. Keely's got her hand raised. Let's see if she wants to address that. And if not, we'll come back to your question, Ramiro.
No, I think that in particular from the get-go around the membership of the Lived Experience Steering Committee and the hat, that came directly out of the retreat. That was the purpose of the retreat, is to find a meaningful way for those individuals to participate. So and especially with regards to the Homeless Service Advisory Board, that we need folks that understand best practices more than we need people who, are just, we want to ensure that those voices are at the table. And so that was the reasoning behind advocating for shall and that, so that that doesn't become less important when considering eligibility criteria.
Yeah, I'm not arguing on the intent. I'm struggling with the word. And maybe what we could use is maybe board membership must include representatives. And I think we'll achieve the same objective as opposed to use the word shall. My suggestion.
What's the difference to you in meaning?
The meaning and the word shall, and let's just go by, but that is we have a lot of shalls in the state law and also on code, which has different connotations, and there's different steps if the shall is not met. And that's what I'm coming from. I think that word is very strong and doesn't have any other steps if we don't meet the shall. But I think perhaps suggestion is to change to the word must. And I think that might be probably better. My 2 cents.
I think must is fine. For what it's worth, as a drafter of state laws, our drafting guides say that shall and must is interchangeable for the RCW and the code in our drafting guides. But must is fine. I have no preference. I do agree that shall seems very, it has sort of an underlying kind of presumption that maybe if we didn't say shall, it wouldn't happen. That must is a little softer, but I think they have the same legal effect.
Okay. Well, I would recommend if the majority want to make that change, that we do it consistently throughout the document and not just in that section. Like where we talk about the Homeless Services Advisory Committee, the Olympia representation requirement. So it's just going to take a little wordsmithing to do that. Is everybody comfortable with it, with that, Danny?
I guess I don't have a really big preference on it. To me, if the words kind of mean the same thing, I'm kind of inclined to just kind of leave it as is. If there's not really a difference, just to be able to move this forward and move, get on with it, kind of.
Right. Well, I can tell you all there was some heartburn from the Lacey City Council meeting a few weeks back, and there was great insistence on the word shall.
Yeah, and I think having the word shall be consistent through these is good. I like the clarification, like among the jurisdictions that, like, you know, one of the concerns I had at the last meeting is, like, if you use the word shall, then what happens if there's not a qualified person who applies from each of the jurisdictions? And I think that is adequately addressed here, that spot gets held open. And then it's kind of on the jurisdiction to do some work to recruit to fill that position, but the committees can still operate, just holding that position open. So I think having it all consistent with the word shall is fine with it, as written. And, you know, shall, must, I mean, to me, those words kind of, they kind of mean the same thing to me. I don't really care all that much.
Okay, Carolina, do you have a feeling on this?
Well, not a great feeling, but I feel like if we're already making other changes, that this one is, you know, I don't see why we wouldn't do it if it's not a heartburn to anyone. And it makes others feel comfortable. Like,
Okay,
it seems like a simple enough change to me. It just,
Yeah. so can we have consensus that we change all the shalls to musts? Okay. And can you just do a word search and replace, Tom? And
That's an easy fix.
okay,
And then we'll change the 2 members must be current participants and represent the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team. Or how did you want to phrase that one?
maybe we could say something like 2 members must be active Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team members, or members. I'm not sure what the rest of that phrase is about, or subsequent organization. Do you know what that phrase meant?
I believe it meant work group, sub-work group. Is that, go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, for the subsequent organization, is that what you
Yeah.
refers to? Well,
How do you,
what I was referring to is if at some point in the future, if Thurston Thrives dissolved and was no longer Thurston Thrives and became something else, Healthy Thurston, that it would carry on to whatever future iteration of Thurston Thrives in the future. Or if the Housing Action Team got renamed as, you know, the Housing and Homeless Action Team, that it would be still, that would be the subsequent organization So that was the intent. And I think all the subgroups that Keely's referring to would fall under. So there's an affordable housing team, there's a senior housing team, there's a homeless housing hub, there's a rental housing work group. Those would all fall under the Thurston Thrives Housing Action Team umbrella. And I think, Carolyn, you're on mute.
Thank you. I hate to hold this up. So I think you get the gist of where we were going with this. I just wanted to be clear what they're active members of.
Yep.
So other thoughts? Is everybody pretty comfortable with the charter as presented? Danny? Okay. Not seeing any other hands raised.
Does this need a
So-
motion?
I think we're ready for one.
Okay, I move to approve the charter as discussed.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Danny, seconded by Carolina. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Appreciate that. And thank you, tech team. I think you all really came up with a very good solution to some of the problems that had been identified there. So appreciate that work. All righty. And we got Krista on board, and has she got share screen privileges? There she is.
Hi there, let me give it a try and I'll see.
Okay,
I'll just share my screen.
so Krista is going to do fair housing presentation. Looks like it's going to
All
work.
right, great.
Perfect.
Okay. Now we're good to go. Hi, everyone. I'm Krista Lenson. I work at the City of Olympia. I'm just going to be sharing some information today about the assessment of fair housing, kind of a summary overview of key points of the data and proposed goals. So I'll be clipping through at a pretty good pace in terms of just giving a very high level overview. But you should have found attached with your packet a little bit more detail about the data, and then some of the goals just in more detail. So there's a little bit more narrative information with that as well. So if you'd like to follow along with that as I'm moving through the slides, that might be helpful. And then just please write down any feedback or questions you have for me, and we'll try to save some time at the end for those as well. And I did also share this information this morning at the HAT, the Housing Action Team. So for some of this might be a repeat for you, but did get a couple of points of feedback that I can share as well today. Okay, so just to give kind of some context to this, HUD requires that entities that receive federal funding create plans for how they spend those funds. So that includes things like community development block grants and home funding. As part of that, we're also required to do fair housing planning. And that just ensures that any projects or efforts are not worsening or continuing patterns of segregation, discrimination, or disparities. And jurisdictions do this kind of fair housing planning every 5 years with their consolidated planning process. So the county the City of Olympia and the Housing Authority of Thurston County decided to work together and do a joint report. And so I'm presenting on behalf of all three agencies and the report and the goals we came up with. So as part of this process, there will also be public hearings and public comment period. So for the City of Olympia, there's a public hearing on March 28th. And for the county, it will be on April 18th. And then the Housing Authority will also be holding a hearing on March 23rd. So I did also want to note that HUD has recently issued a proposed rule on how this process will work in the future. So the current version of this type of report is an assessment of fair housing. And the proposed process in the future is called an equity plan. And there's really an emphasis in that process on transparency and accountability. And so HUD will actually review and approve those plans or work with jurisdictions to improve their plans, and then track progress annually on the goals that we've set as a community. Just to give some background on fair housing. So fair housing laws prohibit discrimination in housing based on protected classes. So I've listed the federal protected classes here. And then in addition to those federal protected classes, we also have additional protections in Washington state under the Washington state law against discrimination. And so if someone believes that they have experienced different treatment or discrimination due to any of those protected classes, they have the right to file a fair housing complaint with HUD or the Washington State Human Rights Commission. And I did also want to note that the Landlord Tenant Act in Washington prohibits discrimination on source of income, which is if you receive income assistance such as Social Security, disability, or you use a voucher like a HUD-VASH voucher or a Section 8 voucher. But unlike those other protected classes, there's no government enforcement agency where you can file a complaint. So that's all just enforced by a tenant if they experience discrimination. Just some real key high-level findings. And again, there's a little more data on this.
Krista, do you want us to save questions for the end?
I think that would be great if possible. If it's a
Okay.
quick question that I can just clarify, I'd be happy to do that, but.
No, that's
Just for
fine.
this-
I'll hold off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So some of the findings overall for Thurston County, people of color, people with disabilities, people who are transgender, and single mothers experience housing cost burden at higher rates. They're more likely to be renters than to own their home. They're at a higher risk for displacement through eviction or not being able to afford their housing. They're more likely to experience homelessness and face continuing gaps in accessing homeownership. Cost of housing and income disparities contribute to the risk of displacement and limit those housing options. Thurston County residents are most likely to experience and report discrimination based on source of income, disability, race, and family status. Thurston County is lacking accessible and affordable housing units to meet the needs of residents with disabilities. Infrastructure and improved access to transit is a key issue for the disability community. And that includes things like curb cuts and sidewalks, as well as transit improvements to dial, lift, and other services. Mold, high heating or lack of heating, and high cooling or lack of cooling costs are top environmental health concerns that people in the community reported are concerns in their housing. Native American households face greater difficulty in accessing opportunities based on where they live. So they have the highest transportation costs, most distance from job opportunities, and are more likely to live in lower income neighborhoods than other racial or ethnic groups. While on paper, it looks like substandard housing. That includes like lack of kitchen or plumbing facilities, and overcrowding is not, the data doesn't say that it's an important issue for Thurston County, but in talking with community advocates, it's very likely that people are not necessarily reporting if they have many people in a housing unit. It might not be accurately conveyed or reflected in the data we have. We heard stories about people who are renting carports or sheds, who don't have heating or kitchen facilities or plumbing. And especially in rural communities where people might be staying in RVs and don't have access to utilities, are more under the radar. And affordable housing was really key over and over in all the conversations and the survey responses that we found, and is really what limits people's housing choice in Thurston County. So for Thurston County, in the past 5 years, there were 45 fair housing complaints filed with HUD and the Washington State Human Rights Commission, and those are most commonly based on disability. And then followed by race and family status. And so we conducted a community survey that was hosted online last fall, and over 600 people responded to that survey. And of those folks, 40% reported that they or someone they know has experienced housing discrimination in Thurston County. So the most common basis for discrimination for Thurston County residents that they reported was source of income discrimination, and then followed by disability, race, and family status. So that aligns pretty closely with the complaints that have been filed, with the exception of source of income. And I think it's important to note that only 12% of the survey respondents who reported an experience of discrimination indicated that they had filed a complaint. 63% of those respondents didn't pursue filing a complaint because they didn't think it would make a difference. And 68% didn't know who to contact to file a complaint. So survey respondents were asked to prioritize some of the top strategies to increase equity and reduce disparities among protected classes in Thurston County. And so really the top priority that rose to the forefront was more affordable housing or financial assistance for housing for low-income individuals and families. And then second, increasing access to homeownership and housing in a variety of types and sizes to meet different needs. And then reducing barriers to accessing housing like criminal history or credit history. And those four were pretty clearly the top chosen priorities. And then the fifth was a tie between education about rights and responsibilities under fair housing laws and better enforcement of source of income protections. Okay, so I'm going to go through each goal that we put together after reviewing the data and the community survey responses. And just keep in mind if I'm missing anything or if the targets seem too low or too high, just feel free to provide that feedback. Some of these goals are already things that are outlined in housing action plans or maybe on the work plans for some of our housing action team subgroups. And then, like I said, there's more kind of in-depth information in the goals matrix that you should have received. So these goals all correspond to those priorities that the community survey respondents chose. So increasing affordable housing and providing assistance for housing for low-income individuals and families is the first goal. and funding for development or acquisition of housing units that are affordable to low-income households is our first goal under that subheading. And we got feedback this morning from Housing Action Team that 80% AMI still is pretty high. So in the narrative section of the goals, it indicates that, you know, while 80% is our goal, the threshold we're looking to meet, deeper affordability is really a need for many individuals in our community and should be prioritized. Creating a resource page or developer toolkit to better inform developers of affordable housing incentives has been indicated as something that would be helpful for community, both nonprofit and for-profit developers. Locating additional funding for rental assistance to low-income households, especially those at risk of eviction, or some kinds of incentives for property owners to keep their rents lower. Considering and recommending relocation assistance programs. There's a couple different models for that. One that's authorized by state law, and then Seattle recently passed a relocation assistance program last year. Increasing access to homeownership. So providing funding for homeownership activities like credit counseling or down payment assistance has been identified as a need. The City of Olympia is going to be undertaking a housing study that will look at affordable homeownership and more non-traditional options like co-op housing to see if there are models that we can try to implement to help more people access homeownership. And those findings can be shared with the broader community. Creating or sharing web-based information with the public about homeownership support. So there are some local banks and credit unions and other programs that are available that some folks might not know about. And so that information can be, you know, targeted towards groups who've had less access to homeownership opportunities, and building partnerships to find if there's ways that we can add additional support on top of those programs or make connections would be helpful as well.
Krista, this is Carolyn. We've only a couple more minutes here, so I just wanted to make sure you use your time well.
Okay, I've got a couple more goals to run through. So increasing housing in a variety of types and sizes. You know, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater have already created pre-approved ADU plans. So those have some basic accessibility and design and construction features, but additional enhancements could be made to make those units more accessible for people with who use wheelchairs or other mobility devices. Ensuring that there are a mix of bedroom sizes and accessibility needs are met in our affordable housing RFPs is one way we can increase those units. And then we already do this with some of our CDBG funds, but supporting accessibility modifications in existing housing units. And then one need that came out in community conversations was that folks who are developmentally disabled typically only have income through Social Security disability. So they are very low income and their needs are not typically met by models of permanent supportive housing that focus on behavioral health. And so they had suggested one way that locally we could help them would be to provide matching funds for developers who are seeking Housing Trust Fund developmental disabilities set aside funding. And reducing barriers to entry of housing. So trainings that would be helpful would be on source of income discrimination and how that interacts with the rental screening process as far as income to renting ratios. and criminal history policies that are overly restrictive. Reducing barriers to entry through other program models. We've had a program that's called Housing Connector come and speak with our housing action team, but there might be other models that would help to incentivize rental property owners to accept higher barrier tenants. And some other jurisdictions are taking steps in this area. There are cities nationally who have limited the way that credit history can be used in rental screening. And then in Seattle, they have criminal history screening limitations. So the rental housing work group that's part of the housing action team already has some of this on our work plan, creating information about people's fair housing rights and responsibilities and how to file complaints, offering training to landlords, tenants, or housing advocates, lobbying state legislature to adequately staff the Human Rights Commission. Currently, there are fewer than 5 full-time investigators for all of Washington state to investigate these cases. Exploring cost to contract with a third party to enforce those source of income discrimination protections. As I indicated before, there is no government enforcement agency that helps people navigate the legal process to enforce their rights. And then again, some of that training, especially on source of income discrimination, because it came up as such a high priority in the community survey. And the last one is just about improving environmental health. Those key concerns were about heating and cooling and mold. And so I've just included some additional goals on that issue here as well. And one piece of feedback we received in the Housing Action Team today was that there are not sufficient codes that address mold prevention in our county currently. And so there are some other cities who have codes that we can look to and best practices that we can learn from. Okay, so I know I went through that really quickly. I'm not sure how much time I have for questions, but I'd be happy to take some of those questions from y'all.
Who's got a question? I know Michael, you had indicated
Yeah.
you were going to save one.
What's that? I didn't hear you.
You're on.
Okay. I mean, it was so the chart of numbers for people who've experienced discrimination is pretty stark in terms of looking at SOID, source of income discrimination, as the primary, or maybe not primary, but at least the most prolific incident of discrimination. And I know that in Tumwater and in Olympia, and I think Lacey has since passed something, I'm not quite sure, that we have robust ordinances prohibiting that. I think one of the things I heard you say was that increasing enforcement efforts of that is a potential way to try to address that issue. And one of the goals or recommendations sort of seemed to be education of landlords, but I'm wondering if there was any other ideas or thoughts on different enforcement mechanisms, because I think largely how we handle it is ad hoc and sort of based on a defensive posture of like, it can be a defense in a courtroom, but that doesn't really stop it from happening in the first place. It's looking further downstream after some of the bad effects have already taken place and damage has already been done. So I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts on what we can do as municipalities to try to make sure that the enforcement of those provisions against discrimination are honored and more effective.
Yeah, I think you know, there could be a possibility of working with a legal aid program or helping refer tenants to those programs more effectively. And I think that, timely enforcement is definitely an issue because there's such a low vacancy rate that, you lose a housing unit, there's not really time to, search for, you're focused on searching for more units rather than trying to navigate a core process. And so I think that, if we were able to contract with some kind of a third party to enforce that, that would help a lot more people access those rights that they have. But I definitely think education is a strong part of it as well. And I think especially training for both tenants, landlords, and advocates who work with tenants to better understand those laws would be helpful as well.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Krista? Danny?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hold. I have a lot of questions. I'm just very excited about this work, but I know you're going to be coming directly to the city with a public hearing at the end of this month. So I'll hold all of that. But I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to, I know that there was some outreach done where there was a lot of translation of materials and just like that, like what you did to reach out to people who don't typically participate in a survey like this.
Yeah, so we worked to create a distribution list with something like 200 community organizations, as well as faith communities. So some of the faith communities who serve particular language groups, and then food banks and other places where people visit more frequently. So we just tried to kind of cast a wide net and make sure that people heard about it. And the Housing Authority also sent a letter to all the participants in their program. And so I think we had about 80 voucher participants participate in the survey as well. And then there was we did some community stakeholder conversations, so outreach to groups like CLO, the Tenants Union, and other community organizations serving residents.
Great. Any last questions? Because we are tight on time here. Okay, Krista, thanks so much. And I hope we didn't rush you too much on there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Feel free to reach out in the future if you have any questions to follow up.
Okay, you want to put your contact info in the chat?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Krista. Okay, tech team updates. Who's got that?
Hi, and I'll just note there's not a chat function in the webinar, so but we'll make sure to send out Krista's contact information for folks.
right.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, so tech team update. The first thing wanted to bring to you, and it's the last page of your packet, so which is page like 51 or so, and I will share my screen here momentarily, is a meeting or two, a couple meetings ago, there was a discussion around having some of these meetings in person. And so the tech team was tasked with thinking about that and coming back with a proposal. So we have something to share with you on meeting in person. And so really two objectives. One is to transition to at least having some in-person meetings to facilitate better communication between members. And then also, especially as we stand up the advisory boards, transitioning back to once per month meetings and trying to move away from the twice a month meetings and see if we can achieve that goal. So for in-person meetings, setting some principles. One is kind of to set the expectation that RHC voting members and staff would attend in person. A virtual option will be available for occasional instances when in-person attendance is not possible. But the expectation is more often than not that people should plan to attend in person. However, alternate members may choose to attend virtually as in their capacity as an alternate, and then it would be available for the general public to attend virtually. So it would be a hybrid meeting. We're really trying to drive that the value of having in-person meetings is actually everyone being in person to facilitate that discussion. And so what we're proposing for a meeting schedule going forward is for the next few months to continue the twice a month meeting as we get through the RFP process. It may be that we are able to cancel one of these meetings, but to continue, so next, the 22nd, continue with our 2-hour meeting, longer meeting, going April. April 26th is when we're shooting, would be the first meeting when the advisory board chairs would be participating in the RHC as the ex officio members. So by that time, we expect the advisory boards will vote on their chair and vice chair, and those folks will be available to participate. The sections highlighted in yellow is where there's a little bit of a difference from our traditional approach. And so we're asking for the May 10th meeting to be a 2-hour meeting, and to do that in person, because that is where we're going to be looking at those recommendations from the advisory boards to make funding recommendations. So asking for that to be the longer meeting in May, and to do that one in person. And then in the second meeting in May, the May 24th meeting, would only be an hour long. So we asking to flip those two. And then beginning in June, looking to do a switch to a once a month meeting, and then alternate between a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting. So every other month would be an in-person meeting. All meetings would have, again, the virtual attendance by public option. Proposing, and I'm working with the clerk of the board, proposing to have these meetings held, the in-person meetings at the atrium at the county's boardroom in the evening. So we're working to get that finalized. Right now, for the November and December meetings, that second meeting, or the meeting is set up for that fourth Wednesday of the month. That falls right in line with Thanksgiving and Christmas. So for November and December, would look to move those meetings up to the second Wednesday of the month rather than the fourth Wednesday of the month, as we're doing for the other months. So that is our proposal. Happy to kind of take questions on it. Understand we're running late today, but we've got time to noodle on this and think about it and come back if this is going to work. If you would like to see something different, different ideas or suggestions. But that's what the tech team is proposing as a path forward towards moving towards more in-person meetings and moving towards meetings just once a month.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Just appreciate that the in-person ones start in May.
Can't imagine why. Okay, well, I'm gonna have a little trouble with the early May one because it conflicts with Lot, but I'll try to work that out. May tap an alternate or something, so. Cool.
Same for me, actually. I have a work commitment on that early May one, and I was relying on virtual attendance. So that will still be an option if we need it to be able to attend virtually. Okay. I wholeheartedly support us going down to one meeting a month. I think that's great.
Yeah. Okay. What, you want to just live with this till the next meeting and then give it the final blessing next time? Okay,
Yep, that works for the tech team.
okay. Anything else from tech team?
The only other update, just a brief update on the right-of-way proposal. So as many of you know, the former Days Inn has been purchased by the Low Income Housing Institute, and they are working to remediate that property, and also working with current residents of the property. So they've been successful in moving a couple of the long-term residents of that property into more appropriate permanent long-term housing. There continues to be roughly 16, 18 or so households at the property, and they're optimistic they're going to get a few more of those households out into other housing situations. They will be able to maintain residents at the property while remediations happen. They're going to move everyone to the first floor while they work on floors 2, 3, and 4, and then they'll move folks when they have to do the first floor. Right now, the estimate from the company is it's going to take about 2 months to do that remediation. That work should start in another week or so here. Working with the city of Lacey, so we're having weekly meetings with Lehigh and the city of Lacey to make sure everything's up to snuff. So roughly speaking, we're shooting for around a early June timeframe when we'll be able to start moving people in from the right of way into that property, which is now going to be known as Maple Court, is the name of the property. So that is kind of from the former hotel moving forward. And of course, once they get in and do that remediation, things happen. So we'll shoot for that early June timeframe, but that's certainly not set in stone quite yet. And I don't know if anyone from Olympia wants to provide an update on Franz Anderson.
Anybody? Darren or Jacinda?
Go Jacinda.
And I can provide a very brief update. Yeah, we had a site tour. Sorry, let me take out my headphones so I can hear any other noise. We had a site tour this morning and did have a good turnout from some local interests and then some, known interests as well. So that went really well. Lots of questions, people, good energy that came out of it. There's a March 15th question and answer session that is a register to attend. So anyone that might be watching that's interested. There's also, a few people that came out that are just really supportive and looking to kind of become part of a development team. So all in all, it went really well, feeling really positive about it. And the city will continue to kind of keep you all updated as we go through the process. As a reminder, proposals are due March 27th. We have asked representatives from Tumwater, Lacey, the county, and then Olympia as well to sit on that review and scoring board. So that process will start March 29th through approximately April 10th, I believe. And then we'll be following up again with an update, going to our council, going to Tumwater and Lacey's councils and the county if they wish to update everyone on the selection and where we're at and kind of next steps. Things are going well so far. Any questions that anyone has, you can feel free to kind of tap me online, offline, or send an email or call or whatever you need to do.
Okay, thanks, Jacinda. So that wraps up tech team. Good. So we still have a couple of minutes for good of the order. Does anybody have something they want to share? Danny?
Two quick things. One, it would be really great sometime soon to get an update on the lived experience steering committee. I know we don't have time for that today, but I would just love to hear what's going on with that. And two, I think we forgot to approve our minutes at the start of the meeting. Do you want me to make a motion?
That's a good idea. Thank you. Yes, we skipped right over that.
I move to approve the February 15th minutes.
Okay. All right, it's been moved by Danny, seconded by Michael to approve the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved. Thank you for catching that, Danny. And I agree, I think it would be good to get an update. Michael, was that a hand? Did I see a hand?
No, I guess if we're in good of the order, I think the only recent development on our end was our council did approve a 12-year multifamily housing tax exemption, which is the one that has, I think, Brad, is it 20 or 30% affordable housing units?
20%.
20%, which is about 30 units, if I recall for that.
I don't
project.
remember
So-
the unit count, even though I worked on that paperwork this morning, but I believe it's around 30.
Yeah, so there's another, every little bit helps, and that's another 30 affordable units in Tamar that'll be online.
Okay. Ryan, is there anything you want to share from Lacey?
Nothing on my end. I see Tom has his hand up, so
Oh,
I'll
okay.
defer to
Tom,
Tom.
thanks. Tom?
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to confirm my understanding is all the jurisdictions have passed the RHC ILA amendment. However, I believe we're still waiting for Yelm to pass that. And I don't know if Ramiro, if you've heard any updates from Yelm on their passage of that ILA.
Yeah, I did receive an update. The city council from Yale discussed this, the amendment. They had a couple of questions. I was able to answer to the city administrator this morning. And that's the update. But they have not passed yet.
Did they indicate when they might take action on it, Ramiro?
When I was talking with Todd, I'd really encourage him, it needs to be done by the end of March maximum. So he's tracking on that.
All right, thank you. Okay. Anything else from the county? All right, well, it's 5:01. If I hear no objections, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you all. Bye.